Go.
I've been asked to talk briefly about the importance of cross-cultural awareness in business education. As we all know, business education is expanding across the globe. Globalization is also expanding. And contrary to what some people think, the global economic downturn has caused companies to become more international, not less. This was shown in a study by The Economist about 2 years ago. It's also becoming increasingly clear that managers need cross-cultural awareness to do their jobs better in an international environment. There are many examples of cultural conflicts that have created problems for various international organizations. In 2002, I listened to a public lecture by Gerard van Schaik, who was chairman of Heineken at that time. Heineken was the biggest beer brewery in the world in 2002. Gerard van Schaik addressed an international conference of managers and educators and talked about the forthcoming merger of Air France and KLM. And he said that there had not been a single example of a successful joint venture between a Dutch and a French company by that time. Van Schaik sounded pessimistic about this initiative too. He said that French managers like to play power games, but this is unnatural in a Dutch organizational setting because the Dutch have a different culture from the French. Consequently, the Dutch employees were scared because they were going to be managed by French managers after the merger. As far as I know, the Air France-KLM merger is not unsuccessful. So Van Schaik's prediction was too pessimistic with hindsight. But it shows how perceived cultural differences can create negative expectations and cause unnecessary stress unless they're properly managed. The study by The Economist that I mentioned finds that according to managers of international companies, ineffective cross-cultural communication can result in very substantial problems, including financial loss for the companies involved in it. Those managers also mention differences in cultural traditions and different workplace norms as significant obstacles to smooth business operations across national borders. Although there are many international companies that still do not pay enough attention to cultural differences, or sometimes even they choose to ignore the existence of these differences, The Economist's study provides strong evidence, beyond reasonable doubt, that most international companies understand the need for cross-cultural competence. As a discipline, cross-cultural management comes in many forms. Most departments of management at the world's largest universities, and even at smaller ones, now have a cross-cultural management chair, or at the very least, they teach cross-cultural awareness. In principle, their approach is quite academic, as you might think, with a strong focus on theories that hardly anybody understands, outside a narrow circle of academics who are specialists in that respective field. Leading management journals across the globe expect abstract theories, even if it's not quite clear what application they can have in real management. Therefore, academics in the field of management, including those who believe in more practical research, have no choice but to follow suit. They have to write what their colleagues expect. In contrast, international MBA programs, and especially executive MBA programs, as well as other types of executive training, prefer a more practical orientation. In this case, sometimes there's a danger that the contents of the course will not be scientifically sound. There are many commercial models of national culture out there. Commercial tests of cross-cultural competence or cultural adaptability and what have you. The overwhelming majority of these are not scientifically solid. They do not have any strong predictive properties and cannot help managers improve their performance. Fortunately, there are also consulting companies like itim that combine a sound scientific method with an easily digestible educational format. You don't have to have a PhD from a renowned American or British university to understand what they're talking about. Their research also combines a reliable scientific platform with a practical orientation. I don't know if this has anything to do with the Dutch origins of itim, but it's quite possible that this is so. The Dutch certainly have a lot of respect for real science and have had great thinkers and scientists since the end of the Middle Ages. But at the same time, they have always taken a practical approach to everything. Finally, I would also like to say a few words about cultural differences in the way that management education is delivered, because this is also important, as we might expect. It is well known that different societies have different educational philosophies and different practices in the classroom, and this applies to management education as well. For example, it is common knowledge that North American students are quite extroverted and communicate easily with the teacher, while Asians are much more reserved and do not like to stand out in the classroom because their culture does not permit them to do so. What is less known is that some typical Anglo methods of management education are not much appreciated in Asia. More than 10 years ago, the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom asked its Chinese students to describe the strengths and weaknesses of British education as they saw them. Many of the Chinese students said that they disliked the practices that they observed at the British University. For example, working in small groups. This practice is very common in the United Kingdom, but the Chinese do not appreciate it very much. Outsiders often see the Chinese as a strongly collectivist nation where people enjoy teamwork. This may be true, but good teamwork is not a natural phenomenon in China. It takes time to build a cohesive and well-performing team in a classroom or in a business company. Throwing people together without any preparation, especially when they don't know each other well, can backfire. I see a very positive trend lately. Business education is becoming increasingly international. More and more students are studying abroad. Sometimes they take whole programs, sometimes they take only a semester or a year abroad. I think that any exposure to a foreign educational environment could be beneficial, as it helps students build a multicultural perspective that will be very useful in the real business world. This trend needs to be encouraged. I'm glad that right now Mexico is hosting this international event, which is a step in the right direction toward building a multicultural world in which people are aware of the existing cultural differences and know how to manage them appropriately.